Coming up on 2020 on ID, a little girl vanishes.
My daughter's nowhere to be found.
And a family's worst fears are realized.
We found her.
She was face down in the creek.
Who killed Riley Fox?
Come on! Admit it!
Her father confesses, but can DNA prove him innocent?
It's the one piece of evidence that could disprove the confession.
A father's fight for freedom and a family's search for the truth. Little girl gone. Welcome to 2020 on ID. I'm John Quinones. In Wilmington, Illinois, everyone had a smile for 3-year-old Riley Fox, the cheerful little girl with the big brown eyes. It was hard to imagine that anyone would want to hurt her, let alone her own father, Kevin. But that was who the police suspected when Riley was killed. As David Muir first reported in 2008, there was one big question. Was Riley's father a monster or a victim?
Wilmington, it was a great place to grow up.
For Kev Fox, a drive through Wilmington, Illinois is bittersweet.
I've had so many memories here, but one really bad one.
That bad memory begins early on the morning of June 6, 2004, in this modest house where Kevin was living with his wife, Melissa.
We were just a happy, young family.
They had 2 children, 3-year-old Riley and 6-year-old Tyler.
So Tyler came into your room and woke you up?
Yeah, he shook my leg and said, "Dad." And I said, "What's up, buddy?" And he said, "Dad, Riley's gone."
Melissa was away that weekend, taking part in a walk for breast cancer in Chicago, so Kevin began searching for Riley himself. He thought perhaps Riley had wandered next door to play with a friend, or maybe she was hiding in the bushes, but he couldn't find her.
So then I started panicking, and then I kept telling myself, like, this can't be.
40 minutes later, Kevin called the police.
I woke up this morning and my daughter's nowhere to be found. How old is she? 3? You're kidding me.
The police began searching too, but found nothing.
I would never, ever in a million years wish for any parent to go through it.
Melissa found out about her missing little girl when she called Kevin to check in on the family. By the time she rushed home, nearly the entire town had already heard that little Riley was missing.
How did people respond?
Everybody was so supportive. I mean, I can't thank everyone enough. It was really unbelievable.
We're a town that comes together in happiness and sadness.
The turnout was a testament to just how close this community is. Kevin and Melissa Fox grew up here. They were high school sweethearts.
I met Kevin my freshman year, his junior year, at a volleyball game.
Yeah, actually, she called me that night and asked me to homecoming.
Kevin's brother Chad left Wilmington to become an investment banker in Chicago. Kevin stayed back home, becoming a young father and working as a painter.
My brother's always maintained that all-American kid, happy-go-lucky type of attitude.
When Tyler and Riley came along, Kevin said he found his true calling, fatherhood.
I feel like that's what I was put on this earth to do, honestly. That's my joy in life.
Like so many fathers, Kevin doted on his precious daughter.
Her big brown eyes, the way she look at you, and her smile. She just makes your heart melt.
Like everywhere we went, people just noticed her, and they would always comment to us about how beautiful she was and what a lovely little girl she was. And it was, the expression like you could brighten up a room.
Little Riley served as the flower girl when her Uncle Chad got married. As she walked down the aisle of the church, she didn't stop, running straight into the arms of the best man, her father, who was standing in the front of the church.
It was fun.
And straight to her dad, right?
Yeah.
It was the last time the family would be photographed together. On the night before Riley disappeared, the sequence of events would prove pivotal. With Melissa at that walk, Kevin made plans to go to a street festival in Chicago with one of Melissa's brothers. He would leave Tyler and Riley with his mother-in-law.
And then we went to the festival and stayed there for a while, then went back to Wilmington.
I know that you were partying somewhat. I mean, how big of an issue was alcohol that night?
It wasn't a big issue at all. You know, I had some beers. You know, I was definitely not wasted.
Kevin said he couldn't drink too much because he needed to pick up the children. It was about 1 in the morning when Kevin returned home with Tyler and Riley, both fast asleep. He put Tyler on the chair in the living room and Riley on the couch, covering her with that yellow blanket.
The kids were sleeping in the living room.
You're right. Yeah.
And you went to bed.
Yes.
And what's the next thing that you remember?
Tyler waking me up and said that Riley was gone.
It was not long before the rest of the family would learn Riley was missing. Uncle Chad and his new wife were racing to the scene.
When we pulled into town, there were searchers out in the woods. You know, and I knew it wasn't very good at that point.
At about 3:30 that afternoon, volunteers Christine Lopez and Lisa Romano were searching along the banks of this creek, a 2.5-mile drive from the Fox house.
I can't even explain it. I just had this really bad feeling about this place, and that's why I came here.
We went in a little ways and the brush started getting thicker.
And then Christine noticed what she first thought was a bag of groceries in the water.
And that's when I saw her. She was face down in the creek.
The police were called immediately, but it would be some time before Kevin and Melissa would learn of their daughter's death. Police brought them in for questioning before they got the news.
Do you remember the moment that you found out?
I think we just both collapsed. But it was just crushing. I couldn't even imagine what life would be like without her.
I think like I punched the wall a couple times, the black wall. I didn't want to believe it.
It would be hard to imagine a grislier crime. Riley had been sexually assaulted, bound and gagged with duct tape, and then drowned. Through their grief, the family resolved to find the killer.
I want to do what I can for Riley. She's not here anymore, but she's still my daughter.
But what Kevin and Melissa did not know was that police were beginning to suspect that the killer was closer to their home than anyone ever imagined. When we return. The abduction and murder of 3-year-old Riley Fox had so saddened the people who heard about it that thousands turned out for the wake and the funeral. The steady stream of mourners even outnumbered the population of Wilmington.
We don't have a lot of those cases, but it just terrifies the community.
Professor Ann Burgess of Boston College has worked with the FBI, profiling the kind of people who would commit such a horrific crime.
She was thrown into the water alive, and so that the haunting factor always is, how long was she alive?
Riley's body was found just outside the town, and because of that, the investigation would be taken over by the Will County Sheriff's Office. And as is typical in cases like this one, Riley's parents, Melissa and Kevin, and the rest of the family all agreed to be questioned and to provide DNA samples.
An investigation initially is supposed to look at family and friends and exclude them.
Melissa and Kevin even allow investigators to interview their son Tyler.
Okay, how old are you, Tyler? 6. 6 years old?
Tyler was asleep next to Riley in the living room, seen here on the crime scene video. Police thought the little boy might offer some new clues in the case.
Where were you sleeping? In the chip.
From the beginning, the Foxes believed it was an intruder who came into their house and kidnapped Riley.
It's very hard to accept still that that I was home and someone came in my house and took my daughter.
But investigators believe the intruder theory doesn't ring true. They don't believe the house showed any signs of forced entry. And more importantly, they think it would take a great deal of planning or luck for the killer to be able to sneak into the house and snatch Riley during the few hours when her father was asleep and on the one night when her mother was not home.
It's pretty risky to do.
Dardick covered the case for the Chicago Tribune.
Go into someone's home in the middle of the night, take the child, and exit while other people are there.
So while investigators put some energy into that intruder theory, canvassing the neighborhood and interviewing local sex offenders, the sheriff's detectives instead grow more and more interested in the last known adult to see Riley alive, her father. In fact, investigators have been watching Kevin from the beginning. This is surveillance video taken at Riley's funeral.
When you would hear of all the questions being asked about Kevin, was there ever, a quiet, dark moment when you thought, is my husband capable of this?
Absolutely not. No. I know Kevin way too well. I've watched him be a parent to our children every day. I'm not the kind of girl that if I thought that for a second that I would keep it a secret to protect him, because I made Riley. Like, she's a part of me, and I would not protect someone if I thought that they had anything to do with harming her. Not for a second.
Did you have anything to do with the death of your daughter?
Not at all. Not at all.
But investigators are not convinced. They take special interest in a security video from a gas station located between the Fox home and the creek where Riley was found. Investigators believe it shows a car similar to Kevin Fox's Ford Escape, passing the station around the time of the murder.
Having Kevin on their list of suspects, they thought, well, if we can show that his car was out at a time in the middle of the night when he said that it wasn't, that would be good evidence to have in the case.
And police believe there was another lingering question. Just why did Kevin wait 40 minutes after realizing his little girl was missing before calling the police?
Yeah, I was wondering if you'd send an officer over.
Well, the police think that any father whose child is missing should immediately call 911.
The only time that I was taught growing up to call 911 is if there's a fire, you know, like big events like that. I never thought my daughter was kidnapped. Never in 1,000 years.
As the summer was on, and with no named suspects, Kevin's brother, Dad, began urging him to get a lawyer.
No obligation, no admission of guilt or anything. I mean, it's just the right thing to do.
I got really upset with him. I got mad at him, saying, you know, why do I need to talk to the attorney? I did nothing.
And I felt pretty hopeless. And at that point, I hate to say it, I gave up.
And as the weather begins to cool, so does much of the public support for the Foxes. A blistering TV report portrays them as partiers, apparently indifferent to the death of their baby girl.
The shots they drop, she's got a new diamond ring, doesn't seem to be behavior of grieving parents.
And the rumors start swirling.
Could you sense that the community was turning at all?
Absolutely. I mean, we went from being the victims of the crime and having everybody's sympathy to all of a sudden we were bad people. It was awful.
And there was another dynamic at play. As the chief prosecutor, Jeff Tomczak, was dealing with increasing pressure to solve the case, he was also fighting for his political life. Election day was approaching.
Tomczak seemed to be in an increasingly losing battle for the state's attorney's race.
Would a high-profile arrest help? A week before that election, Melissa and Kevin get a phone call. They say Will County detectives told them there's something new in the case. The parents head to the station, believing there's finally a break, but they would soon be in for something else.
They separated us. They took her down a hallway, and they took me. It was like a room up on a stage. You walk up the stairs, and then it was a real small room.
And there, the interrogation would begin.
And then they were asking me about the night, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, he looked at me and said, "We have reason to believe that you killed Riley." I yelled out, "Are you joking?" And that's when I freaked out. I stood up and started pointing in his face, saying that, "You know I didn't do this."
Kevin says over the next 14 hours, he is grilled about the murder of his own daughter.
What kinds of things did they do to you?
They broke me down mentally, physically, emotionally. But I stayed strong. I knew I denied everything.
They asked you, will you take a polygraph test?
They kept on saying that they knew I'd flunked the polygraph test.
And so you said, I'll take it.
It's kind of like they're egging me on.
Kevin agrees to take the test, but he flunks. And by the time dawn breaks, Kevin Fox breaks too.
Now police say Fox has given a videotaped statement implicating himself. Law enforcement
Kevin confesses to police, offering a statement in which he admits to killing Riley in a bizarre fashion.
He gets up in the middle of the night. He goes into his bathroom. That also in the bathroom is the little girl, is Riley.
He says he accidentally hit her with the door. She stumbled, hit her head on the bathtub, and the thinking that he accidentally killed her.
He panics and thinks what to do. So in the police theory that he stages what is called a staging of a sexual assault.
He did something to make it look like she was sexually assaulted, and that he put duct tape over her mouth.
Then he takes the child, puts it in the car, and takes it to the river and puts his child's body in the river.
Kevin states to police that he walked down the side of this overpass and left Riley in the water. Just hours after Kevin Fox made that statement, he's charged with murder in the first degree.
I just can't believe it. No. See, he was a loving father, totally.
We've been to the ceremonies, the benefits, everything for the family. It's all been an act.
These detectives, I want to say, and it's their instincts. Their instincts, their investigative instincts that led to this statement coming down.
The next day, State's Attorney Jeff Tomczak announces he's seeking the death penalty.
The young child in this case died a terrible death, and for that reason, the penalty deserves to be death.
That is usually a decision that's weighed for weeks, if not months, before it's made.
The prosecutor denies his decision is motivated by politics, but not everyone is convinced.
Virtually immediately, there are allegations that he brought these charges in order to bolster his chances in the upcoming election.
Kevin insists to his family that that confession was false, and that after 14 hours, he believed it was his only way out of that room.
A lot of people will want to know, if you didn't kill Riley, how do you possibly confess to it?
Say you were trapped in a burning room, and there was only one door, and the fire was just flaming around you.
So you looked at this as your only way out?
It was my only way out.
Kevin's family is distraught.
And I remember getting a phone call from my dad, and I've never heard my dad cry, but you know, he was just sobbing and said that my brother had been arrested for Riley's murder. You had to prepare yourself mentally for the worst, and I remember having nightmares about his execution.
Having confessed to killing his daughter and facing the death penalty, Kevin Fox now needs a champion who will believe he's innocent. He's about to get one.
I decided to take a chance on him. I just felt like he was somebody that was really worth trying to save.
Kevin Fox fights back when we return.
And I like shooting a big gun like this because it's very powerful, and I like mastering it.
It would be fair to say that defense attorney Kathleen Zellner is always up for a good fight.
Kathleen Zellner is something of a legend in the state of Illinois.
Over the years, she's built a reputation for freeing the wrongfully accused with DNA evidence. But that reputation was not made by picking risky clients.
I decided a long time ago I did not want to defend people that I thought were guilty.
The morning Kevin Fox is arrested, his brother Chad goes to Zellner begging her for help.
I wasn't going to let my brother be executed before I died. I'm supposed to die first. I'm older.
After just a single meeting with Kevin Fox at the Will County Jail, Kathleen Zellner agrees to take the case.
I was as close to him as I am to you. I really was studying his face and everything. I mean, that's not foolproof, but you can tell a lot. And he told me in that first interview the entire story of his interrogation. He described in detail his version of what had happened and what had led him to agree to their story. And just looking at him and listening to him, I decided I was going to take a chance with him.
But it wasn't just Kevin's recounting of the interrogation that led Kathleen Zellner to believe him. Kevin Fox had no history of child abuse and a family who says he was a caring father.
What was Kevin like as dad?
I think a really just great dad, really hands-on, always was.
So Zellner believes Kevin when he says his confession was coerced.
It fit perfectly. It was a classic case of a false confession.
How can a father falsely confess to murdering his own child?
That's the thing that's so difficult for people to understand, but it does happen. Kevin Fox had lost his daughter. She had died. He was unbelievably traumatized by that.
Zellner says that trauma made Kevin vulnerable to what she calls psychological manipulation by interrogators. 14 hours worth, she maintains.
Hello, my name is Anthony Ambergia.
Portray.
And I'm portraying Detective Swearingen.
And she would later shoot this recreation of the questioning based on Kevin's recollection.
I didn't kill my daughter, though.
Yes, you did.
No, I didn't.
Don't lie to me. You killed your daughter. Don't lie to me.
They won't let him leave. They tell him to sit down. Then they start what's basically just a shouting match.
Daughter murderer. Come on, admit it. Admit it. Don't be wasting our time. Look at me in the eyes. Don't waste my time!
The cop had handcuffs, and he was pounding them on the table right in front of me, leaning down my face and practically spitting on my face, yelling, you know, you're worthless, you're a terrible father. It was very intense, very intense.
Kevin says the detectives then showed him photos of his own daughter's dead body and refused to let him speak to his father or a lawyer. Kevin claims they made graphic threats like this.
I know people in jail, and I'm going to make sure you get every night.
He'd have me raped every day I was in there if I didn't say anything.
He thought this was his only way out.
What, can you tell me another way out? What would you do?
But police say Kevin's account of that interrogation was exaggerated and inaccurate, that he failed the polygraph test. But some offer another explanation.
It is pretty much polygraph 101, that you would not want to test a subject who had been interrogated for hours.
Polygraph expert Fred Hunter has years of experience working for both Will County and Kathleen Zellner. He says a polygraph given to someone interrogated for so long would very likely produce false results.
The validity of any test results after that are going to be tainted.
But it was more than just the length of the interrogation or the polygraph under duress. It was the content of Kevin's statement, which Zellner found most suspicious.
None of it made any sense. He told, in the details he gave, an absolutely impossible story.
Impossible, she believed, on many fronts. If Kevin Fox had really accidentally hurt his daughter inside the home, then why didn't he take her to the hospital or simply call an ambulance? And if he drove off with the little girl, then why was no forensic evidence found inside the car? And lastly, Zellner had serious questions about the story involving the bridge. Kevin Fox told police that he brought his daughter Riley to the bridge and then walked on the steep embankment to the water's edge. And that's where he put the little girl's body into the creek, a notion Zellner considers preposterous.
I mean, the chances he could have come down that side are pretty remote.
And it wasn't just the steepness of the slope on the water's edge. Zellner also thought the current there on the south side of the bridge was too weak to carry Riley's body so far.
A 30-pound bag simulating the body of 3-year-old Riley Fox.
Zellner conducted her own test at the creek.
Police gave a scenario of what happened, and that's what we're checking out.
She said it proved a body dropped at that site couldn't have drifted to the location where Riley Fox's body was discovered by those volunteer searchers.
You couldn't float anything under from the south side.
She also cast a critical eye on that fuzzy video of the car seen passing the gas station that night.
They really actually believed that this was strong evidence, and that tells you everything about this case.
Did it look like his car?
No, it did not. The wheelbase is short. The angle of the windshield is different. You would have to have the license plate or a very clear picture of his face to ever have that hold up in court.
Perhaps all of this could help establish reasonable doubt in a juror's mind. But still, that troublesome confession. And Zellner knows the odds are stacked against her client.
Even knowing, the confession wasn't corroborated, that we could do all of these things at trial, no matter how good an attorney I am, and I actually think I'm quite a good attorney, he was going to be convicted.
So as you're sitting there with your client, what are you thinking are his chances?
I felt like I was looking at a dead man.
There were a lot of reasons to think Kevin Fox did not murder his young daughter. He'd been devoted to her. His family believed in him, and there was no concrete evidence against him. But none of that was likely to outweigh his own words, said his defense attorney. Once again, David Muir.
Kathleen Zellner had a real problem. Her client, Kevin Fox, had confessed to killing his own daughter, Riley.
The only way you can trump a confession is with DNA. You've got to have DNA.
But Riley Fox's body was in the water for hours. And when a body is found in water, it is much harder to retrieve a DNA profile that will lead back to the killer. Zellner feared she'd robbed of the silver bullet, which had worked for her so long in the past.
And you thought any chance at DNA had washed down the river?
I thought it would take a miracle for us to find DNA.
And Zellner was right. The tests came back negative for blood and semen. There wasn't enough there. And inconclusive for saliva found on Riley's body.
Inconclusive.
Meaning what?
The entire case would soon hinge on that one word.
Well, I didn't know what it meant, but I had exactly that reaction. I'm not sure what this means. So I called my DNA scientist, Carl Reich.
Ms. Zellner asked me to interpret the language of the report.
Dr. Carl Reich, who runs a private Chicago area lab, told Zellner that the word inconclusive was actually cause for hope. Because inconclusive doesn't mean there's no DNA, it simply means it hasn't been read. The equipment might not have been sophisticated enough to pick up on what little DNA there was.
Another kind of DNA testing, called YSTR testing, could certainly be possible and might in fact be the right kind of testing for this case.
YSTR testing analyzes the Y chromosome, which is nearly identical in males of the same lineage.
The Y is the male, and you can test very small amounts.
With just that partial profile, they can't fully identify the criminal, but there is enough to eliminate a suspect with 100% certainty, perhaps Kevin Fox or any male member of his family.
It's a well-established technique.
That kind of test was valid in court, but neither state nor FBI was yet using it.
Now they can do it, but they couldn't do it then. He said, you've got to get this to a private lab.
Zellner gets the Will County prosecutor to agree to send the samples to this respected lab in Virginia. But she told her client it was still a long shot, that the sample from the river that day was so small, so negligible, the chances they would glean anything from it were slim.
So your only fear at that point
There won't be enough.
is that there wouldn't be enough.
Yes, exactly. That's the only thing I'm concerned about. Will there be enough? Because I know he's innocent.
It would take months to get her answer. Bureaucracy holds up the DNA samples.
Everyone assumes from watching television or from their wishes that it goes very quickly and the entire process can be resolved rapidly in some short time, like an hour. Unfortunately, neither the law nor the lab is very quick.
For the first 2 months, Kevin sits in the prison infirmary for his own safety. He's often threatened by others in jail.
They put me in medical because it was such a high-profile case that they didn't want me in the population. And then everyone from the population, they'd act like they were sick or something just so they could come up and get a glimpse of me. I was like a zoo animal, I guess, where people just wanted to just see me in a cell.
Would they say anything to you?
Oh, yeah. Child molester, baby killer. What I was in there for is the worst possible thing you could be in jail for. The worst.
He keeps a diary while behind bars.
I should not be here at all. I was the furthest person to do this to Riley, but yet here I am. Ever since I got to protective custody, I've been more depressed than ever. I don't exercise. All I do is cry and sleep.
But Kevin manages to survive in jail.
Hello.
And 8 months after his arrest, his attorney, Kathleen Zellner, finally gets that long-awaited phone call from the DNA testing lab. The analysis of the sample from Riley's body found in that river is now complete.
I pick up the phone and she said, Kathleen, I've got the profile done. There was enough DNA. I've excluded your client.
And you're saying?
I said, well, you just saved somebody's life.
Kathleen then races to the Will County Jail to tell Kevin. The accused father is stunned.
She said, we got the test results back for the DNA and it wasn't a match for you. And it's something in those terms. And I just looked at her and I said, okay. And then I could see her expression like, wow, he's handling it pretty good. And we talked for like 3, 4, 5 more minutes. And then she started walking out, and then I stood up, and then when I went to grab the door handle to get out, that's when it hit me that I was going home, and my name would finally be cleared, and I just collapsed.
I think it just hit him that it was really over, and his whole body was just sobbing.
With the case of Kevin Fox collapsing, the new head prosecutor, Jim Lasko, who won that election, holds an immediate court hearing. Kevin Fox, who could have faced the death penalty, is released. All charges dropped.
It was a nightmare, and I don't want to relive it right now.
Do the test before you make the arrest. He has been in prison 8 months.
For 8 months, were you dreaming of that moment?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's definitely surreal. Riley loved Kevin more than I can't even put it into words. And I feel like it was a miracle that there was DNA, and it is a miracle that Kevin is sitting here right now.
But the case that had shattered this community was far from over. Now had come the time for Kathleen Zellner to switch from defense attorney to offense, pursuing a massive lawsuit brought on by Kevin and Melissa Fox against Will County. The Fox family claimed that the investigators who first came to this neighborhood didn't just make innocent mistakes. They believe those investigators were out to convict Kevin Fox from the beginning.
So this entire tag team of detectives...
They know he didn't do it.
Zellner was convinced because she says she retraced the detective's steps. That DNA had been sent on to the FBI, which is often the case when DNA samples need further testing and state crime labs aren't equipped to do it. But in this case, FBI records show that all additional DNA analyses were discontinued once Kevin offered that confession. The FBI stated that a Will County investigator told them to stop, despite that inconclusive finding. That question still hanging over the case.
Why would you discontinue the DNA?
It's the one piece of evidence that could disprove the confession.
That could have set him free.
That could have set him free.
The detectives denied that accusation, but Zellner said it went even further. The cops, she argued, deliberately ignored evidence seen here on the crime scene video. Evidence suggesting an intruder was in the house.
This is one of the most extraordinary things in the case. The back door is standing open. We know that's how the intruder came in, because the lock was broken. This window, the reason we think the killer was in the house, one of the reasons is this window was open from the inside. They're looking for an exit route, and they realize the outside window is screwed down.
None of that was ever fingerprinted, nor was that blanket used to cover Riley that night.
The blanket that Riley had been asleep and rolled up in, and the killer had touched, they didn't even take it and test it.
But was that intruder theory the family kept pushing too far-fetched? Professor Ann Burgess, who testified on behalf of the Foxes at the civil trial, says cases involving intruders are not as rare as many think.
There are many cases where an intruder comes in and takes a child. Elizabeth Smart, absolutely. Perfect case, yes.
Elizabeth Smart was taken from her bedroom at knife point by Brian David Mitchell, a.k.a. Emmanuel.
It can happen.
In the JonBenét Ramsey case, the detectives once discounted the intruder theory as well. A lead investigator even wrote a book arguing that JonBenét's death was an accident quickly staged to look like a murder. In fact, Zellner thinks that's what inspired investigators in this case to adopt their own accident theory.
So you believe that entire scenario was made up by the detectives?
Absolutely, without question.
A bold claim for sure, and to convince the jury of it, Zellner would turn back to this videotape, the interrogation of 6-year-old Tyler.
So Dad doesn't like it when you cry? What else would make Dad so mad?
You'll remember it was just weeks after Riley's murder that police questioned her brother, Tyler. What Kevin and Melissa said wasn't until long after that they saw what happened during that interrogation.
When you woke up, what did you see? What was the very first thing you saw when you woke up from each other?
Zellner says the tape reveals just how badly the police wanted Tyler to point the finger at his own father.
One day he put Riley's jams on her. Was he angry? No.
They were really going down the avenue of, didn't you see your father take Riley and go out of the house?
And how many times did they try to get him to talk about his dad?
We counted 168 times that he's asked and that he shakes his head no, like he's doing now.
You said he went outside. Was he with somebody? No. Did Riley go with him for a little bit?
He's trying to tell her he doesn't know anything, and she just won't stop.
And if you watch this interview, the poor child, the brother, is just getting more and more upset.
Okay, is there something you know about Riley? No. Is there something you know about how she left the house? No. So if it is, it's okay to say it, Jenny. I know you're real upset. What's upsetting you right now?
When you look at that video, that interrogation of that little boy,
I think what you see in that is just purely evil. They take this child who's in this horrible situation, and they are trying to manipulate him to help them frame his father. It is despicable.
But the police will say this was just their genuine attempt to see if Tyler knew anything.
Today, Tyler doesn't talk much about his time spent in that room.
She made me cry. I had just lost a child, and to see the way that they decided to treat the one that I still had, it was really terrible. It shouldn't have happened.
The interviewer on that tape settled with the Foxes out of court and denied any wrongdoing. But the Will County detectives went to trial.
Melissa had a lot of reservations about it because she just want to relive the whole thing. And I was saying, you know, Kevin, do you want to do this? And he was saying, yes, I want to go to trial, and I don't care if I only win $1. He said, I want my reputation back.
After weeks of testimony, a jury would decide whether Kevin West was just a bluff or a full-blown frame job. The verdict when we return.
It's over now and it feels great.
3.5 years after Riley Fox was murdered, the scales of justice swing her family's way.
It was 10 people on the jury, and they found that I wasn't in the wrong, that I did everything right.
Jurors award Kevin Fox and his wife Melissa $15.5 million in their civil rights case against Will County.
We want people to know the truth. We're not bad people. We never were.
That was the main reason why we went to the civil trial, is to finally clear my name 100%.
Though the jury rejected the most serious charge of conspiracy, for attorney Kathleen Zellner, the record judgment is an extraordinary victory, the wrongfully accused.
I have not done a trial where I have felt that I so exposed people as lying.
And I hope Will County is listening.
We wanted to talk about the case with that first prosecutor who originally charged Kevin Fox, former state's attorney Jeff Tomczak.
Mr. Tomczak, David Muir with ABC News. We'd like to talk to you about the Lee Fox case.
Actually, I wouldn't have court this morning, so I'm going to run over there and do my court.
Can we do it to court? Because we've called several times on the case. We'd like to talk to you about it.
Actually, no thanks.
Tomczak negotiated a resolution with the Fox before the case to trial. He denied any wrongdoing.
Do you think the Fox was treated fairly?
I stand by the decision I made on that case.
In 2008, county authorities were appealing the massive verdict. The detectives declined comment, but in a written statement, the new state attorney Jim Glasgow says he continues to stand behind the detectives. The facts and circumstances of the case, he writes, would have led any prudent investigator to determine they had probable cause to arrest Kevin Fox. Glasgow believes the outcome of the civil trial would have been different if the jury had been allowed to view the videotape of Kevin's confession. But that video was suppressed and has never been made public. The Will County Sheriff's Department says a new team of detectives is now investigating Riley Fox's murder. But Kevin and Melissa aren't simply relying on them.
Our next step is just to fund the investigation to find our daughter's killer.
That next step was taken in the summer of 2008.
Good.
The Foxes hired private investigators Rich Grove and Carlos Rodriguez to chase down any leads and loose ends.
There were interviews that were left undone. There was DNA that was not gathered.
The Foxes believe they can advance the case themselves because they now have that partial DNA profile. That same DNA that set Kevin free might help them now find someone else.
YSTR profiling can't identify someone uniquely, like nuclear DNA, but it could certainly start a conversation with an investigator.
The private eyes returned to that neighborhood, convinced that the intruder theory still holds, suspecting the killer might not be a stranger.
In my opinion, the killer is someone who knows of the child, somebody that knew the area.
Burgess believes it's possible the killer came in through the back door into the laundry room while no one was home and found a place to hide.
Somebody comes in, they've had a plan, they've had it thought out, they know what they're going to do.
In Burgess's theory, hours after the abduction, Riley's dropped not at the water's edge, over the side of the bridge into the middle of the creek, where the current is strong enough to carry her downstream.
It is very creepy and very frightening to think that somebody could actually do that.
There you go.
The private investigators began following their own leads, in some cases asking people they consider potential suspects for DNA samples. When they got the results, found themselves back at square one.
The sample received from you did not match DNA profile from the evidence.
I don't think the picture is complete yet. I don't think it's going to be complete until we find the killer.
The Fox won't see any money until the appeals process is finished. For now, at least, suspended their private investigation into Riley Fox's murder. But Kathleen Zellner believes her client has already something very valuable: reputation.
Winning that, for him, transformed him. from somebody that people just identified as, oh, that's that guy that said he killed his daughter, when everyone understood what had led to that, what they had done to him.
They had DNA, they should have tested it, and our family would have never been put in the position that we were put in. And that's why we're telling our story, because this needs to stop.
But even after the DNA and the civil jury's verdict, there remain some people in Wilmington who still believe Kevin Fox killed his daughter.
There are people out there that still have made up their minds against Kevin.
That's one why the Foxes have to another Chicago suburb, and why it is still for Kevin to go home.
It hurts that some people around here understand.
But for all they lost and all they've endured, Kevin and Alyssa turned their newest gift.
I'm dizzy too.
In March of 2006, the third child is born, a daughter they named Tegan.
Tegan does remind me a lot of Riley personality. They're kind of the same. But we miss her. Every day is a struggle. To know that you had something so wonderful in your life and someone took it.
How do you move forward as a dad?
Just be thankful for what I have right now. I have a beautiful daughter at home, a son, and a beautiful wife. You never know what's going to happen, so I have no regrets and just enjoy what you have.
In 2010, a local man named Scott Eby confessed and pled guilty to the murder of Riley Fox. He received a life sentence without the possibility of parole.